Amazing innovations of all shapes and sizes abound in the annals of land speed racing during the 20th century. Every kind of propulsion system, including large and small piston engines, turbine thrusters, and wheel-driven propulsion systems, powered by turbine engines, naturally, and much more spectacularly than rocket thrust. And that's what, let's delve into the fascinating and eccentric tale of Walter Aaron's Wingfoot Express 2 and its place in the annals of beginning in the 1920s. Rocket automobiles eventually culminated in the Big Blue Beast's attempt to break the land speed record in 1965. This is a tale of courageous individuals, brilliant minds, and two brothers who weren't on parachuting from a machine that is unparalleled in the history of land speed racing. Is an exhilarating and unforgettable experience. The plot of Wingfoot 2 revolves around delving into the history of rocket-powered vehicles and their astonishingly rapid adoption. Public's thoughts in the twilight of the Roaring '20s, known as a man of steel, Fritz von Opel runs the family firm in Germany, which produces the enormous Opel brand of automobiles. In 1928, Max Wahler, a prominent engineer, approached von Opel because of his adventurous spirit and need for thrills. German rocket enthusiast with the brilliant concept of creating a rocket plane and rocket vehicles to captivate the people enthusiastic about the technology and the possibility of breaking records. As they explored the topic, they reached out to a third party. Frederick Sanderson was already involved in the rocket and pirate technology manufacturing industry, in fact, all throughout the globe. Sailors and Boers resorted to signal rockets and line mined, tossing rockets as a means of self-defense and others in times of extreme crisis who might want assistance. The trio wasted little time getting to work, ultimately deciding that a rocket-powered rack, an abbreviation for rocket car, in German, was the name of the Opel. The vehicle was transported to the test track at the Opel factory, where it was fitted with a rectangular arrangement of 12 tiny rockets. In a one-on-one session on April 11, 1928, the vehicle reached 62 miles per hour in just 8 seconds. Well, that was a shocker for a lot of folks back then. Speculation about rockets whisking humans to the moon, crossing the Atlantic in a matter of hours, and the usual imagined futures where it sparked a frenzy following the minor success of a much bigger concept. Now von Opel, Valerie, and Sanders couldn't contain their excitement any longer. So they literally doubled down on erecting the rack. 2. Creating an aerodynamic vehicle by installing stabilizer wings, and 24. The vehicle's back end with rockets and 256 pounds of fuel to the vehicle's architecture allowed it to reach speeds of more than 125 mph. But unfortunately, there was no in order to maintain public interest. The driver did not use their expertise or knowledge to determine the car's actual speed. Renowned AVU circuit, not a private corporation track, and many people showed up to witness the behind a cover. The vehicle was unveiled, described, and prepared for its explosion, all of which took place approximately 3 hours before the show began. Weeks after, the crowd let out a collective scream and whoosh as the original model of the car roared through the track in a big cloud of smoke. The automobile didn't launch all 24 rockets simultaneously, and I had no idea the Opel was missing. Were electronically discharged in sets of 4 per time. Von Opel pressed the button located on the floor of the vehicle. From 0 to 148 miles per hour, the vehicle repeatedly halted at one button. At about the exact same moment that he became a hero, the crowd went absolutely wild, as if nothing had ever happened before on this planet. Reached a halt, he made the decision that while ground-based rockets were neat, rocket-powered flying would be his next conquest. Since we're only at the beginning, we'll leave von Opel and his rocket here. However, the next destination is powered by rockets. In 1932, the Sig Hugdahl was the greatest in the United States for dirt track racing. Participated in dirt track racing during the 1920s and 1930s, winning the title for 6 consecutive years. He had the audacity and talent to come to the United States from Norway, and he was living the American dream. Days and a plethora of accounts indicate that an instinctive understanding of pirate techniques, and supposedly, he piloted the 836 cubic inch Wisconsin Special in 1922. Timed laps on the sands of Daytona Beach at speeds of more than 180 mph using an inch engine substitution of the top sanctioning body, the Automobile Club of America, by the International Motor Contest Association body when the record was being kept. But we can trace it all the way back to 1932 and find that the Hugdahl never provided a clear answer. His rocket automobile. But I'd venture to say that he was more motivated by a need for practicality than anything else. Sprint car racing was a staple at most of the state fairs where he raced during the summer. To traction effectively, he had a knack for winning, and when he did, the money was good. I didn't think so, but what if he created an exhibit vehicle that could earn him money wherever he went? He could even make it look special. He experimented with putting on a show and walking away with the dough from every single occasion. On Daytona Beach, Florida, with some crude rockets strapped to a car by crude. I mean that they were lit by hand he took a giant leap forward with his latest invention, which used 32 tubular. With 20 steel holsters arranged in a cross pattern on the rear of the vehicle and 6 on each side, the Hug Doll underwent a very standard Miller race vehicle of the day and transformed it into something that people were willing to pay a premium for, even during the Great Depression in the United States. I observed that the vehicle had no powertrain whatsoever, just rockets and SIG in the seat, which weighted 1,550 lb. Additional data. Alas, the lengthy news coverage of the featured vehicle often centers on extolling its aesthetic qualities and revolutionary spirit rather than providing any real information regarding the description of its internal mechanisms. The excellent news is that, similar to all rockets, they were rather straightforward, and actually, they were very similar to Von Opel. One could adjust the amount of rockets fired at variable speeds by pressing a button on the dashboard. At the exact moment, he would adjust it to suit his distance traveled, and with each step on the floor mounted button, another set of sensors would activate. So how fast was it? The car could only go up to 55 mph, and it looked like it took forever. According to multiple accounts, the vehicle would complete a few laps on a standard dirt track at the state fair before dying. Served as a solid act for the majority of summer 1932. And then, in case you were curious as I was, August 15th came along. He frequently wondered during his studies where the solid fuel rockets were stored or how he might keep his rocket fuel replenished, from which you no longer need to draw power for your vehicle. These rockets were once powered by liquid fuel, but now, thanks to Witch's Brew, he personally refueled his rockets in between performances or races. But on August 15th, it all came to a head when he was in the middle of a performance at the Mississippi Valley Fairgrounds. The vehicle went boom. Turn around on its own, set off all the rockets at once in an uncontrolled explosion, and then let the doll cuddle up. With a wrecked vehicle, strained back, and incredibly limited time to repair it, but miraculously, he was already making headlines again by August 19th, promising to take the wheel in 2 weeks at the Minnesota State Fair. You may reach speeds of up to 75 mph, which is quite fast by today's standards. According to conventional wisdom, the vehicle could often match the lap times produced by classic sprint cars on the same day. A conventional sprint car raced alongside Hug Doll, although it was alone and trailing massive clouds of smoke. Same year, he parked the display car and won his 6th consecutive national MCA title. As 1934 came to a close, he retired from driving and ended his career as a race promoter. I often wonder what happened to my 1937 Daytona Beach fling with Bill France, the proprietor of a nearby petrol station. That the conflict broke out later in the 1930s, replacing rocket automobiles with V-2 rockets that crashed into unsuspecting citizens, and the focus in London and around the world shifted to the ongoing conflict that had engulfed the entire globe and the development of weapons to defeat the enemy. As was the case with a lot of technology at the time, innovations and improvements made during this era would have immediate in 1946. The plot of rocket cars takes a turn following the war. This is the result of a tire business's ownership of a rocket firm, and it takes place at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Duke Nen, along with General Tire, Aerojet Nen, and Rubber, was something people certainly knew about the General Tire and Rubber Corporation when it came to well-known, prominent race car drivers on a national level. To begin with, what exactly was an AOA, and what on earth was a J-rocket? To clarify, AJ is erroneously abbreviated as Jet Assisted Takeoff. The correct abbreviation is R, which stands for Rocket Assisted Takeoff, and with that in mind, I will make reference to let's refer to them as JOAS for the remainder of the video, as it's a name that most people are familiar with. What exactly are they? Rockets that were used as a supplementary propulsion system for aircraft to take off from shorter runways and during combat in the event that a runway is severely damaged and cut short. Or if an airplane is loaded to the very edge of its maximum capacity. These rockets first appeared in the 1920s, when the military was looking for any means to gain airborne supremacy. In the 1930s, Russia and Germany developed variants of this technology for use in a wide range of aircraft. the US in 1939, the United States government initialized the Guggenheim's development with a hefty $1,000 investment. Caltech's Aeronautical Lab, where Theodore var Karman oversaw the project with the help of a team of brilliant individuals, engineers worked on developing small units that were able to pass these tests by 1941. Units aided a conventional T-plane in taking off and thereafter propelled an aircraft into the air. On August 16th, using only their own rocket power, the Aerojet company was born after a successful test. The military was placing orders for thousands of rockets at a rapid pace, and those Caltech engineers were in the thick of it. During that period, the workforce expanded from 6 to hundreds, and then to what seemed like tens of thousands. Suddenly, though, a huge issue arose getting the finances needed to expand a business in a rapidly growing industry like rocketry. As a result, the rocket company's founders, who had issued themselves shares, were unable to secure funding from any bank in the world. In the beginning, when everything was new and uncertain, they needed a steady stream of revenue to keep their firm afloat. Was about to go down in 1944, they contacted General Tire and Rubber, hoping that they could secure a contract with at least one of the EET personnel had prior knowledge working with General Tai, who was well versed in several media and other areas thus. They attempted to persuade the corporation to put money into it, and they ultimately decided to because they saw the investment's potential and could relate to some of the chemical crossover acquired. Aerojet and incorporated it into their own firm, securing stability and finance from external sources. Imagine my surprise when I tell you that General Aerojet used rubber. They found a binding agent for use in their solid rocket fuel development, and shortly after, they started receiving orders for an enormous amount, even as other divisions of the corporation advanced research into other aspects of rocketry. Ultimately, the business would emerge as the world's leading manufacturer of rockets and propellants. Returning to the topic of Duke Nen on May 21st, 1946, during the 194/6 Indianapolis 500, race authorities permitted Nen to use the car, which was sponsored by General Tire, drove itself onto the circuit for a few test laps. Will be entered in the Indy 500, excluding the two miniature Aerojet JATO rockets attached to the sides of the rear axle. The objective was to get out of turn 2 and launch the rockets to gauge the amount of speed boost. To see how well it performed, some predicted that the vehicle's power and acceleration would increase by a factor of 2, while others predicted that it would detonate, and Nen was on board with it. But the end outcome was far from extraordinary, just a 20 mph bump from 41 pound a second. 2 more times that day, he refueled the solid fuel rockets, and there was a great deal of smoke trailing behind the vehicle. Outcomes were unchanged, unsatisfactory. It wasn't a failure, but it was timid enough to halt Nen's summer exhibition tour plans due to his lack of charisma and speed. Boasting about a 50-stop trip that included a visit to the Bonneville Salt Flats to set speed records and a qualifying run on the last leg. Nen mentioned a 50-stop race that took place in 1946 and placed 22nd the Sans Rockets. Since Nen was a racer, the tour and the Bonneville Salt Flats were fascinating. These men were racing at the same time. It appears on the daily, so one might wonder how he managed to find the time to plot everything out. The answer is he didn't. Although someone else did it, including National Speedways Inc., operator Al Sweeney, and working mainly on the State Fair dirt track circuit, he is one of the biggest racing promoters in the country. Recall the day when I worked for Alex Sloan, one of the best race car drivers of all time, and the DV Sig Huygens car. As an exhibition act, he was aware that a rocket car would attract spectators, and when Nen's car failed, he knew just who to see in Veterans Affairs, the Grata brothers, because he was a Chicagoan. Inventor, showman, and entrepreneur, these men had founded the Grand Corps Speed Parts Company in 1945. Al Sweeney approached the crew, who were renowned for their ability to create anything with flair, with an offer to create an exhibit rocket vehicle for use in his fair races, offering a sufficient fee to cover the costs, and it would be really appreciated if it could be prepared yesterday. The guys are moving quickly because they purchased the former Don H. Burt Special. About 10 years prior to their breakthrough, this 1934 Ford base racer had tried to get into the Indy 500. The Grand Corps rocket was produced from a hole in the enormous rear of the vehicle that housed 8 rockets clustered together, propelled by Antonio, the renowned Gratelli, was introduced to a man named STP Fortune some decades ago. Reached 108 mph at Nashville Speedway, produced a lot of smoke, and was generally run ragged all summer. 1946 was a delightful advertising attraction, but it fell short of the expectations of those who paid for it. Sweeney, the Grelly lads, and the money all came out very well, and the automobile is still around today, have been controlled in events like the Great Race and others, but the rockets have not been fired since. We presented Walter Ahrens, our story's protagonist, who is Art's half-brother and spent around 10 years in the Together. The two guys raced, constructed, engineered, and dominated a series of events in the 1950s. Green Monster Allison's power drag racing cars racked up more cash as they owned strip and national records around the country. And then what two young men from a feed and hardware store in a can could have ever imagined. The real causes of the breakup in their brotherhood will remain a mystery. Yet everything changed in the blink of an eye about 1960. The connection, however, seemed instantaneous and undeniably long-lasting. Maybe it was something Walter did in 1960. He introduced the first jet plane and revolutionized the game. Actually, it was the first jet-powered land vehicle in history that didn't rely on railway tracks. It was environmentally friendly. Monster 16, and although it started off extremely slowly, barely going over 120 mph in the quarter mile, it eventually had to have bugged Art if it took that long to become the most in-demand drag strip attraction in the nation. Art remained attached to it, at least it appeared to in a different video I recorded for this channel, which you can find here. Art was supposedly well established by 1962, after initially appearing at the Bonneville Salt Flats in 1960 and constructing his renowned eater. He was sick with Walt's jet Green Monster taking all the limelight and cash, so he constructed his own Cyclops jet dragster. To the Bonneville Salt Flats, where it was shown alongside other works of art, and to what seemed like every drag strip in the nation. That was the humiliating acquisition of the General Electric J79 turbine engine by the Federal in 1962. He achieved a speed of 342 mph with his automobile at a Florida military scrapyard, and while it was the fastest open course record, it wasn't the absolute record. In 1963, both Walt and the Cockpit Car's creator, Art, had their own ideas for how to improve the program. Contract Salt Sickness, which began during a trade show conference in 1962, Tom Green was speaking with someone while working as chief engineer for the PA String Company, which made torque wrenches. The subject of land speed record holder Tom Green's fascination with aerodynamics and the ways in which it's highly probable that, given sufficient time and resources, one of them could construct a vehicle capable of shattering the current record to bits. As the men moved on with their plan, they built a model and purchased a Westinghouse J46 engine for under $1,000. Tom Green was responsible for manufacturing the complete, while Walt started his welder. Advertising Goodyear tires on the vehicle's body, distinctive nose, and engine cover. Goodyear had an existing sponsorship agreement with Craig Pruh for huge projects, so executives were already sold on the idea. Funds. But these individuals possessed an enticing offer, and Ahrens utilized mathematics to demonstrate to the dozen or so executives or relatives the limit of the competing vehicles vying for the record, and they departed the conference with a guarantee of roughly $50,000. This was a small sum in comparison to everyone else, but they accepted it nevertheless, and the Wingfoot Express was formed in May of 1963. The vehicle, which was approximately 30 feet in length, was completed and ready for testing. Approximately cylindrical in shape, it weighed 2,800 kg, stood 6 feet at its tallest point, and was over 12 feet broad at its widest point. The front fairing and cockpit that Green had created using his own theories of aerodynamics were praised by publications for their designing the vehicle and revealed that it will undergo testing at Detroit Dragway on the final weekend of each month. Walt Ahrens wanted to see how the car appeared from the side at the drag strip before driving it at Bonneville, so he had Chuck Hatcher, one of his jet drivers, pilot the test. Walt trusted Hatcher because of his experience. Already on his third run, the automobile was after 2 sluggish laps around the nation in a Green Monster. Utterly disastrous when it took off and careened down the track, crossing the finish line with a hefty automobile. As they careened past the end of the track at over 200 mph, parachuted, braked, fed, and fired through a wall down a forested ravine, across a street, and hauling hundreds of feet of metal fencing with it, Hatcher was, "It's all right. The car wasn't severely damaged." But the body that Tom Green had created was completely destroyed. This just made Walt Ahrens' problem worse. While he stood on the starting line, watching this disaster unfold with Bonneville in the background, he would be Tom Green was given little time to do anything. When he was laid up in the hospital, the doctors informed him he would never drive his creations again. Repair the body undaunted. Green toiled tirelessly to construct a new body similar to Aaron's. In July 1963, Green, Aaron Hatcher, and Doug retrieved and repaired the chassis. Rose and Tom Green went to Utah to try to break the land speed record, but Tom Green received the shock of his life. He was designated as the driver upon their arrival, even though two seasoned jet pilots, Hatcher and Rose, were also on board. And Tom Green would try to win the world championship, even though he had never driven faster than 130 mph on his own. Land speed record on the Bonneville Salt Flats by slowly running in the 200 mph area for the first couple of days. On July 24, 1963, Green mustered the courage and expertise to give it his best, but the design of the automobile was letting salt into the engine, which was then accumulating on the fan blades and producing huge vibration and power loss, failing to reach speeds over 300 mph while not using the afterburner and gradually decreasing the speed with each subsequent run. The media enjoyed themselves immensely with notwithstanding their best efforts. The following day, the crew acknowledged a crushing loss and chose to replace the engine. However, anything else occurred. Doug Rose, who would spend decades as the driver of the legendary Green Mamba jet dragster, chose skydiving, which is essentially the same as what we now call parasailing, in the air at a height of 50 to 60 feet when suddenly his parachute gave out. Plunging him into the Wingfoot Express was once again a mess, and Rose's spine was cracked and his heel was broken. Soon after the losing team departed the Salt Flats, Craig Brio would set a new land speed record, much to everyone's amusement. With a year to complete the required adjustments, he could reach speeds of almost 400 miles per hour in his Spirit of America jet car. After undergoing certain modifications, the Wingfoot Express became a fan favorite at winter auto shows and during spring drag strip testing. Enabled the resolution of multiple issues, and the vehicle was prepared for its redemption by September of 1964, with the exception that didn't start out well, reaching 309 mph, but eventually started to. The good news is that the team had more experience than in 1963, so they could afford to slow down on repeated passes. The crew spent a few days swapping out their old, worn-out J34 with a brand new, fully functional engine that the men had brought along as a spare. Despite improving their speeds, they fell short of the record, even with Green taking full use of the afterburner on the engine. What was wrong with this guy? He kept it a secret from Walter Fons until nearly the very end of Saturday, October 3, 1964, when the audience learned. Was his half-brother and a family rival, and in a scene that exemplifies the saying blood is thicker than water art, suggested a change. Connecting to the jet's fuel system and expanding the diameter of the clamshell at the engine's back end, moving from a 17-inch diameter with a fuel injector that is 1/16 of a turn smaller than the engine's. The first of two record runs for the automobile was at 46.5 mph. Augmentation. On the return run to Tom Green, Craig Brilove's 47.65 mph from the previous year looked within reach, released the Wingfoot Express's full potential, allowing the vehicle to race 420. This made heroes of Tom Green, Walt Ahrens, and the Wingfoot in an instant. On October 5, 1964, Art Ahrens were the focus of international news coverage for 2 days. Did 479 in one direction and 396 in the other to shatter the previous land speed record with a new record of 43402 mph. Art would respond to Wingfoot Express's Craig Breedlove in a way that verges on shame, and Ron would respond to him. From 1964 all the way through to its conclusion, Walt Ahrens continued to push the record higher and higher, and higher. Wasn't finished yet. You see, Walt had a secret trick up his sleeve, a method to significantly increase the Wingfoot speed. Speedily adding J rockets to return the vehicle to the Salt. 3 Aerojet 15K 1000J rockets were added to the Wingfoot Express's arsenal in November. Designed to burn for 15 seconds while producing 1,000 pounds of thrust rail, these solid fuel boosters would be the thanks to their pluggy work. We've added a new driver, Bobby Tatro, whom Tom Green had recruited. 420 miles per hour was more than enough speed for him. Tatro was courageous and qualified for the position, but how did Walt acquire these rockets? These rockets utilized an electric glow, suggesting that there might have been hot rodders on board at Aerojet. The solid fuel rocket would burn for 15 minutes after being ignited by the plug that ignited the black powder. It didn't matter if you wanted to or not, the solid propellant made these rockets quite safe to handle. At Bonneville for a new batch of goods that could withstand harsh handling and even heat shock. 650 mph rated tires, as they braved the extreme winds of the year. Tires were being delivered as the altitude salt flats started to work against them, with intermittent rain and even sleet falling on them. After their prompt installation on Tuesday, the weather took a turn for the worst as snow fell. Despite this, Walton made an appearance. Along with his Avenger jet dragster and Wingfoot, he had 2 cars for another purpose, and Paula Murphy was the third. An innovative female racer who had set a previous record of 161 on the flats was set to shatter the record for female land speed. Murphy set a 2-way record of 2, regardless of the opposition from wet salt snow and others. Oral score Walt had put 26. 371J rockets on the Wingfoot Express, which went beyond just being. Cole appeared to have insider knowledge that the rest of us lacked regarding the rockets, who were on the cusp of becoming a major sensation at Walter Ahrens, was going to construct an automobile that Bobby Tatra would drive, and Bonneville John Cole had the inside scoop on it. Hidden away in a modest shop on Pickle Road, just a few hundred steps from the art museum. In January 1965, Walter Ahrens, owner Aaron, sent a single featuring an automobile to the Globe as a tease. He intended to construct it in order to not only surpass the current land speed record of 536 mph, but also to set a new record for Ahrens, who has been discreetly collaborating with Alex Tremulous, the Fed automobile, and the sound barrier while doing it. The creator attempted to compile research in the late 1940s for a hybrid jet rocket entry. Since Messrs. Jenkins and Jenkins were unable to procure a turbine engine for the project, it descended into this state. Aaron started building the Wingfoot Express 2, Bonneville's first, in secret at his shop. Entry into the land speed record war propelled only by rockets while the machine was assembled. The few individuals who would witness it asked Walter a series of design and engineering questions that led to the addition of additional bracing, gussets, and steel. Goodyear increased the number of bars while simultaneously increasing the weight by adding extra they had the funds, and their defense division built the huge, thick driver canopy and aerodynamic wheel covers at the back of the Wingfoot in the form of a massive conical slant. The vehicle possessed 2 wheels spaced around 13 feet apart at the back, with a total length of 29 feet and a height of 9 feet, and it was a monstrosity, weighing close to 4,000 pounds before even one rocket was attached. Those rockets, numbering 15 AO jets and 15 Kansas 1000s, would be attached to a massive rack located at the back of the vehicle, which is about 3 feet long, 10 inches wide, and weighs 144 prior to launch. The rockets would increase the vehicle's weight by another ton when fully loaded, as seen in the initial prototype. Before making its covert premiere at the Salt Flat in July 1965, the automobile was never mentioned in the media. An ever-increasing number of engines would be used by the rocket-powered monster to determine when and how to fire the blasters in instead of launching all 15 rockets at once. The process would involve firing them in succession, much as in the days of von Opel. The vehicle reached a top speed of 300 mph when driver Bobby Tatra ordered 10 rockets to be fired in rapid succession. It wasn't until September 1965 that newspaper articles introducing the Wingfoot Express made their debut to the general audience, putting the beast through its paces at the Icon Airport with just 2 Joes. It was a sight to behold, Alex included. Aaron purchased 50J rockets from Tremulous at the airport for the listed price of he acquired them for $36,000 by 1965. They were no longer designated as military equipment. Following the completion of all Aerojet tests, Joe S. was undergoing testing for use on commercial airplanes and other public uses. Built 236,000 of them, and as aircraft turbine engine power levels increased, Joe S. depleted military supplies to the point that research into their use started in the early 60s to determine the maximum amount of time that products could be stored without being utilized before experiencing a decline in performance and dependability. It was decided that life would be at least 10 years long. Surely Walt scored a bargain on the 50 he purchased, but this was even though it was still a significant outlay. On September 2nd, the group visited the Salt Flats, where they encountered nothing but a sea of white slush. The salt had been saturated by the rain, and they were back to waiting, just as they had been at the end of 1964. A few days later, the car reached 290 mph. On only 7 of the 10 rockets put into the vehicle were this promising on the 23rd. It neither felt nor had to have been. Ahrens declared his intention to conduct a genuine record attempt by letting the car lose with all 15 missiles. He seemed uneasy about responding to a reporter's expectation inquiry with the response, "We'll just have to see what happens." End quote. The outcome was far from what they had hoped. For a pitiful 247 mph average over 2 runs was all that. After disembarking, they deployed the 15 rockets, and Tatro displayed a peak airspeed gauge reading of 485 mph. In the final moments of the fire, the vehicle coasted to a speed of 406 miles per hour, resulting in the Walt Ahrens showed no sign of giving up. Even after the idea's fatal flaw was revealed, he had a backup plan, and he put it into action. The intention was to add 10 additional J rockets before towing the car into a hangar at Air Force Base, with 5 on each side and a thrust of about 25,000. They would get what they needed from PBS and the capacity to stage rocket burns out for longer periods of time. They gave it another go on October 19th, and this time it may have been their worst failure to date. As Tatro took flight, he started launching the rockets at precisely the times and in the sequences planned by Ahrens and the AAU jet engineers. Invention, but the wiring was terribly flawed. All of a sudden, some rockets were launching from the incorrect end, unleashing a barrage of flames in all directions. A few of them shot out the sides of their bottles, igniting the cars inside. The contraption, which emitted flames in every direction, resembled a comet and reached speeds of 438 miles per hour in this unruly state. And upon his trembling return, Tatro was astounded to see the wiring and an abundance of, as the parts of the body that were cooked melted away. The parts that were disfigured beyond description remained. It didn't matter how he set up the rockets, for shooting the burn time was always the biggest problem. Because each stage only allowed for 15 seconds of acceleration, Tatro was unable to keep up their pace throughout the time mile. Due to the car's enormous weight, the acceleration was so sluggish at first that by the time it reached the measured mile, since Ahrens checked his diminishing supply of J rockets, he turned his team's attention back to the wind since the fuel was almost gone. The automobile was rewired, the body was repaired, and 25 were reloaded. The rockets they brought to the course on October 23rd were successful this time around. Just as planned, the automobile became a haze as it accelerated across the salt and entered the measured mile. It had been the rocket's finest run until the fire went out, and now Tatos was hurting all over. The crew spotted him as he came to a stop, his airspeed indicator reading 580 mph. Excitedly, they had accomplished their goal in the shutdown area, even if their automobile was still far from the sound barrier. Fantasized about what the car could do, or so it seemed, until Joe Petroli, the chief, approached them. At Bonneville, the timing officer recorded a speed of 476 mph. The crew was informed by Ahrens that they had finished their endeavor, and they fell about 70 meters shy of the record. It was evident that the vehicle was moving, so they decided to return to Ohio and find out how to accelerate it. At least 500 mph, and perhaps much more than that, when the rocket halted, the vehicle's tremendous mass and aerodynamic drag significantly reduced its speed, but it managed to reach it despite the incredible 476 mph coasting. It is still not good enough for the Wingfoot Express 2 never returned to the salt and was never seen again, despite reaching 476 mph. Back in the spotlight, and the general consensus is that Walter Ahrens dismantled the system and discarded its parts. Data that would indicate any other outcome that year, the record would reach 576 mph. Art and Craig Breelove engaged in the most spectacular speed battle ever at a moment that will go down in history, reaching speeds of exceeding 600 miles per hour. Never again would Craig Breelove achieve an official speed of 6 mph. That year, when Liv destroyed Art's Green Monster at nearly 550 miles per hour, the worst automobile accident in human history would occur. Miles per hour or higher would be the land speed record for 5 years, until Gary Gabowski's Blue Flame Special trailed behind. In 1970, the wheel would achieve an ironic speed of 62247 mph. Even if it was a liquid rocket, the sight of rocket power taking off makes you grin. Walter Ahrens would be proud. He lived to be 96 years old in 2013. He passed away due to pneumonia-related problems. He drove his fleet of jet vehicles throughout the 1970s when he retired to Braden, Florida, and lived out the rest of his. Several people find Walter Ahrens' legacy tragic, but I find it fascinating, and it took place last year in his hometown of Akron, Ohio. It's truly remarkable how he and Art dominated drag racing for so long, both in terms of popularity and performance. created the first jet dragster using only his wits and a lack of resources. The idea was completely absurd. He built Wingfoot 2, which was a triumph of courage and determination, and briefly captured the world record for land speed. Shocking look at the tenacity and determination of a single man. I genuinely think the vehicle probably went over 500 mph at some point throughout its brief stint on the salt. There is a glimpse into the wacky past of automobiles. The world record for land speed has changed hands once again, this time between a turbine-powered automobile and rockets. I'm not putting any money on the possibility that we will break the sound barrier again. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more about automotive racing and gearhead history, like and subscribe.